Thomas Edison was one of the greatest inventors of all of our time. He invented the microphone, the phonograph, the incandescent light, the storage battery. I'm talking about movies and more than 1,000 other things. But on December 1914, something happened to him. He had worked for 10 years on a storage battery. The work had greatly strained him financially. And on this particular evening, spontaneous combustion had broken out in the film room. Within a few minutes, all of the packing compounds, celluloid records, and film and other flammable goods were in flames. Fire companies came from 8 different towns to try and put the fire out, but they couldn't take down the intensity of the fire because the water pressure was so low that the attempt to douse the flames was futile. Everything this man had built was destroyed. Thomas Edison was 67 years old when all of his assets went up in flames. Then, to add insult to injury, the damage exceeded $2 million, but the buildings were only insured for $238,000 because in their minds, because it was made of concrete, then they thought that it was fireproof. The inventor's 24-year-old son, his name was Charles, and the story goes that he was searching frantically for his father, and when he finally found him, he looked over and Thomas Edison was calmly watching the fire. His face was glowing in the reflection, and his white hair was blowing in the wind. Charles said this. He said, "My heart began to ache for my father. He was 67 years old, no longer a young man, and everything was going up in flames." But I want you to listen closely to what Edison said. When Thomas saw his son Charles, he shouted, "Charles, where is your mother?" When Charles said he didn't know, Thomas made this statement. He said, "Go find her and bring her here. She will never see anything like this as long as she lives." The next morning, Edison looked at the ruins and he made this statement. He says, "There is a great value in disaster. All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew." Watch this now. 3 weeks after the fire, Edison managed to deliver the first phonograph. Here's what I love about this story. It matters not how great your disaster. It matters not how badly you mess up and the mistakes you made. Don't you know that God has the power to turn everything around? God is able to cause you to become a success in spite of your failures. God can take you and He can take me to a place where He can set us to a place of victory in spite of the things that we have gone through. What I love about our God is that He's able to take us from merely surviving to a place of thriving. And so as I continue to teach on this subject, I want to give you 3 thoughts concerning the difference between a thriver and a survivor. Number 1, thrivers refuse to let what is remain what is. Let me say that again. Thrivers refuse to let what is remain what is. We've all heard that statement, it is what it is, and it's that mentality in people, well, that's just the way it is. But you know Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that justice who just recently went into eternity. When she started her legal career in the 1960s, now listen, what I'm about to tell you, you couldn't even fathom this today. But when she started her legal career in the 1960s, only men could get credit cards, only men could sit on juries or serve in combat. Listen now. But instead of weeping and moaning and groaning about how unfair the world was for women, Ginsburg went about dismantling those biases as a lawyer and a judge. You see, here's the thing about survivors. Survivors not only moan and groan about what is, they don't understand that what they tolerate, they perpetuate. Whereas a thriver has the mentality that you can waste your energy whining about what is, or you can acknowledge what is but refuse to live with what is. Because the second thing about a thriver is this. Thrivers see where they are right now as a temporary state and not their fate. Thrivers see where they are right now as a temporary state and not their fate. See, here's what I found out about most people. Most people have taken that it is what it is position to a place far outside of where it should be taken to. Here's what I mean. What you're dealing with may be ever so real. You cannot deny the facts. And you need to recognize that if something is what it is, you must recognize it for what it is. Because if you and I don't do that, we never get the desire, the need, nor feel the need to access the power to change what we will not acknowledge. But listen very closely. Because denial will keep you from turning around whatever needs to be turned around in your life. But here's what I've noticed about most people. Too many people live our lives in the resignation that because it is what it is, it always will be what it is. But watch this. Romans 4:16 through 21, and listen very carefully as I read it. Therefore, it is of faith, that it might be by grace, to the end the promise might be sure to all the seed, not only which is of the law, but to that also which is of faith, of Abraham, who is father of us all, as it is written, I have made thee father of many nations, before whom he believed, even God, who quickeneth the dead, and calleth those things which are not as though they were, who against hope believeth in hope, that he might become the father of many nations, according to that which was spoken, so shall thy seed be. And being not weak in faith, he considered, this is Abraham, considered not his own body now dead, when he was about 100 years old, neither yet the deadness of Sarah's womb. He staggered not at the promise of God through unbelief, but was strong in faith, giving glory to God, and being fully persuaded that what God had promised, he was able to perform. Let me talk to you about facts, because facts are truth. Here's a fact. Abraham was 100 years old. Now listen to me. This dude was so old, he doesn't get out of bed to turn the lights on. He has the clapper on the lights, the TV, the electric blanket. He's even got the clapper hooked up to his pacemaker. Now stay with me for a moment, because Sarah's not far behind. She's in her 90s. She is the forerunner of the commercial where there's this elderly lady lying on the floor who declares, help, I've fallen and I can't get up. Abraham can hardly get out of bed. Sarah keeps falling out of bed and then can't get up. And then here comes God. And here's what God says. I want you to understand that even though the two of you are so old you can hardly move, I want you to understand that Sarah is going to get pregnant. She's going to give birth to a child who will be the seed of many, many nations. And Abe, you're going to be the daddy of many, many nations. Now listen to me very closely, because these facts are very real for them. If there was ever a situation in which you could declare it is what it is, I think this is one of those situations. Abraham is too old to even start the engine. Forget about putting the pedal to the metal. Sarah's so old she no longer uses I have a headache as an excuse not to have sex. She says my whole body aches. So Abraham just rolls over. But listen, when God spoke into their situation, Abraham staggered not at the promise of God through unbelief. Why? Because Abraham was fully persuaded that God was able to perform what he had promised. Let me talk to you for a minute. If you and I are going to be thrivers and not merely survivors in this life, you and I have got to come to the place in our walk of faith where we no longer stagger at the promises of God through unbelief, but rather we give him glory by being fully persuaded that no matter our situation, no matter what we're going through, he is fully able. Now that's very important. He is fully able to perform that which he has promised. And I know what some of you listening to me right now are thinking. You're thinking, you know what, Bishop, you don't understand what I've done. Or you don't understand what I've been through. Or you don't understand what I'm going through or what's been done to me. You don't understand that it will take a supernatural act of God to turn this thing around for me. I want to talk to you today. My experience has been that God is the God of whatever it takes. And he will do whatever it takes no matter what you're in, to take your this is what it is in your life and turn it around for his glory. He is able to give you victory, so much so that when you come out of your season of challenge, here's what I love about God, you will be better coming out than you were going in. Hold on a little while longer. I want to remind you again today that God is the only one I know who, when he seems late, he's right on time. But listen, my friends, you have got to not stagger at the promise of God. I have a friend who had a rap sheet as long as the state of Texas. Everything from drugs to robbery to violent acts. He carried that record for 40 plus years. It hindered him so much because he couldn't do everything he wanted to do for the glory of God. And one day he is called into a courtroom before a judge concerning his record, and the judge called him in, listen to me now, to announce to him that his criminal record had been completely expunged. No one can explain how it happened. It has not been explained today. The judge simply said, your slate has been wiped clean. Well, I think I know what happened. He had a mother that prayed consistently for him and never staggered at the promises of God, because his mother had been promised by God that one day he would be in the ministry. Listen to me. You and I must learn to see where we are now as a temporary state and not our fate. I love that old song that says, I'm so glad that trouble don't last always. Ephesians 3:20 says, now unto him that is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us. Notice what it says, everything that God does exceedingly above what we can think or believe, it is dependent on us understanding the power that is at work in us. And so, thirdly and finally, thrivers understand that you cannot achieve what you cannot believe to receive. Thrivers understand that you cannot achieve what you cannot believe to receive. Let me just say it like this. There are times when God will do supernatural work on your behalf. You see, what happened to my friend was a supernatural act of God. But let me tell you what I know is that most of the time, the way that God is going to work for you is to work with you to turn around what you desire to have turned around in your life. And so what you got to do is you got to get a picture. You got to get it in your spirit and get a vision in your spirit and then believe for it and then begin to reach for it. See, here's the mistake that so many of us make. So many people sit around doing nothing saying, I'm waiting on the Lord. Isaiah 40:31 says, they that wait upon the Lord. But what we don't understand is that word wait in the Hebrew is not passive aggressive. It means that while I'm waiting on God to do something powerful, I'm doing everything I know to do in my own power. I'm moving in succinct deliberation with what God is speaking to my spirit. And so you got to get a mindset of a great warrior that determines that I'm going to hold on to it. I'm going to go after it no matter how many battles I lose along the way and no matter how long it takes. Bishop T.D. Jakes wrote a book, Reposition Yourself. Let me just read you a paragraph from it and then give an illustration that he gave. He said that great generals know that they may lose some battles, but they don't worry about this because ultimately they will win the war. They understand that the lost battles provide them opportunities to better fortify themselves against the enemy later on. They understand the importance of perseverance. My brothers and sisters, you must cling to this truth. No matter how sharp the pain of life is, you must dig in deep and never give up. We must not give up on ourselves or another and continue using the power of our minds to beat the odds. He goes on to tell the story that after raising her family and managing her household, his grandmother went on to go to college in her 40s for a degree in education so that she could fulfill her lifelong dream of teaching. She used the transition period that we know and that we call the empty nest stage as an opportunity to soar. She successfully completed her degree, taught throughout her 50s, and became a tremendous motivator of young people who came through her classroom. When she retired in her mid-60s, she had the satisfaction of knowing she had successfully fulfilled her dream and made an impact. Listen to me. It doesn't matter how old you are or what you've been through, how many battles you feel you have lost. It is never too late to win the war. But you got to rise up with something on the inside of yourself and determine that your temporary state is not going to be your fate. You're going to have to make up your mind to achieve that which you believe to receive. You're not going to sit around with some pie in the sky mentality, waiting for some supernatural, mystical thing to happen around you. And if God does that along the way, then so be it. But when I think about people who think like that, I'm reminded of the story of the farmer. He took over a piece of land. He successfully turned that rugged land into a productive farm. No one before him had done that. And one day somebody walked by and they said, my, look what the Lord has done. And I love what that farmer said. He says, yeah, but you should have seen it when God had it all by himself. What was he saying? He was saying, yes, God does his part. And if God does something supernatural, that's wonderful. But in the meantime, I'm going to do everything within my power to do what I know to do. See, what I'm telling you is this, that Hebrews 11:6 says that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him, not sit around waiting for something to happen. Mark 16:20 talks about the great things that God did through the disciples. But there is one part of that verse that we never talk about that I love so much. It says that they went forth and they preached everywhere. Watch now. And the Lord working with them. They had to do something. When they did what they knew to do, the Lord worked with them, and confirmation came by way of signs and wonders. Here is what I am saying. You can't just dream. You've got to have the mentality that I'm going to do something if you're going to recover. And if you will do something to make a step to turn around your situation, let me tell you something, God will work with you. He will work through you and he will work for you. And when it turns around, here's the exciting part. You will be the sign and the wonder. You will be the one that everybody had written off. You will be the one who everybody said that you're never going to make it, that you're never going to be anybody. You will be the sign and the wonder of those who said you'd never recover, who said that you were done, and God will turn it around. And if you will do what you know to do, then God will cause your critics to stand in awe of how you got over. And so let's just review very quickly 3 differences in thrivers versus survivors. Number 1, thrivers refuse to let what is remain what is. 2, thrivers see where they are right now as a temporary state and not their fate. And lastly, thrivers understand you cannot achieve what you cannot believe to receive. Why is that important? Because you see, Paul said it like this, or rather James said it like this. He says, you show me your works without faith, and I'll show you my works with faith. Because faith without works is dead, and vice versa. So what that means is this, quite frankly, saints, we got to do what we do and then trust God to do what he does. God bless you. May you this day continue to believe that you are a thriver and not just a survivor. Father, now bless your children. Bless those under the hearing of these words. I thank you that your word is transforming, because you made a promise that it will not go out and then come back to you void, but it will do everything that you sent it to do. The only thing that matters and makes the difference is our receipt of that word. So may your people receive the word on good soil so their lives may be transformed. and they may become the light to the world, that even in the midst of chaos and destruction and all of this craziness that's going on around us, that we as the children of God, we are the thrivers and not merely survivors. This I thank you for. In Jesus' name, amen.